evening, everyone out there. Thank you for joining us tonight for a special Face It Live Q&A session presented by Fayette County Public Schools in the 16th District PTA. And of course, during this time, it is most important that our families and communities engage together and support one another.
The Face It Live platform allows us to virtually have real talk, build real partnerships, and allow real ways for us to express what we're feeling, exert our energy in a positive way, and be solution-driven in our approach to whatever we're facing in our communities. So good evening again. My name is Sharika Smith, and I work for Fayette County Public Schools in the Department of Student Support.
She's awesome. And I am Melody Westerfield, the FACE, the Family and Community Engagement Liaison at William Wells Brown Elementary School. And so as COVID continues to be a overshadowing factor in our lives, it seems that it is not the only thing causing us to have anxiety and to be exhausted in 2020, right? And so when we think about the work-life balance, our families and communities, there are a lot of challenges that we are facing in our society, from mental health to social injustice, to educational challenges, to even gun violence. And so we decided to create a collective 3-part trauma series for which we have already addressed the definition of trauma, and we're going to do that again tonight, but also how it pertains to gun violence and trauma. And so we talked about that on our previous show that aired on October 22nd. So we want you to go back and watch that show. And, it's very interesting and it was an awesome show. So we want you to watch that. But you must know that these subjects are impacting our families and our children in the most profound and frightening way.
Absolutely. So as we navigate this discussion of collective trauma, we understand that it can be a very heavy topic. It can be very deep for some people. So you all watching at home, and even us, the host and our guests, kind of think of your own triggers and take a step back if you need to. If you're watching at home, you can always pause it. I think you can pause it. If not, if you have to step away, it will be on our show later on. So if you need to step back and watch it later, that's completely understandable. So tonight, our guests are going to focus on trauma, and then also more specifically depression and suicide. Every episode, we're going to just review what trauma is and really try to get to the underlying root of the bigger picture. Our conversation is geared towards youth in this chat, but we'll also address adults and the aspects of how it relates to adults as well. Depression and suicide are a public health epidemic. We have some people here with us tonight to help navigate this conversation. So let's introduce our guests. Siobhan Threats, if you will go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, so I'm Siobhan Threats. I go by Chevy, and I am the mental health specialist at Henry Clay High School. I've been doing therapy for about 16 years now. I have a background in trauma-informed care and training others in trauma-informed care.
Awesome. Then we have Toby. Come on, introduce yourself. Come into the room.
Good evening. My name is Toby Jenkins. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been in practice in Chevy Chase it's been 5 years. So I focus on relationships, but I see individuals as well.
Awesome. Well, we are so fortunate to have you both. So before we kind of get into the nitty gritty, give us your definition of collective trauma. Let's think about how it impacts our children, how it impacts the community, and what warning signs and symptoms do we need to look out for when we talk about collective trauma? And Toby, if you want to go first, that'd be great.
Sure. I think maybe talking about it from a benign standpoint might be helpful. So if you've ever gone to an action movie or a scary movie and you leave and you're still emotionally charged, that's an example of collective trauma. You've experienced it with everybody else that perhaps you went with and everybody else in the theater. And so that's kind of a benign example, but we can experience have that same kind of experience when stuff happens in real life. And so I often think about it as vicarious trauma, and we tend to kind of minimize the effect of seeing, like George Floyd, for example, how much that affects everybody. And I was looking back up, my kids were in middle school in 2018 with the shooting in Kentucky, Western Kentucky, the school shooting. Yeah. And shortly after that, my kids were fearful about going to school. And there were several other threats after that. And sent parents into panic. And so we weren't at that school in Western Kentucky. I think it was Westview High School, but that incident, we all experienced trauma from it and the response from it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Chevy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. So to add to that, I think it's good that we talk about it because a collective trauma, we might not even think that it's actually affecting us necessarily. Because when we think about trauma, we think about something that's individual to us, something really bad that just happened to me. But collective trauma can be something that happened to somebody else, but still affects me. So like the school shooting that you mentioned, you might not have been a part of that individually, but it still affected you. And then you worry later, am I safe at school? Where can I be safe? And so that can make it difficult to identify sometimes for ourselves. And then you'd want to try to find ways to talk about that when you need to. So parents talking to their kids about what might have happened, how to deal with those bigger emotions when you're dealing with a collective trauma. So I'm really glad that we're having the series and we're talking openly about that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so talking about collective trauma, right? And switching over to what does that look like when what's depression, so now that we know that what collective trauma is, what is depression?
Depression is kind of an overarching feeling of sadness when you normally wouldn't expect to feel sad. And I like to simplify depression and anxiety because to me, they're kind of the different side of the same coin. So anxiety, I look at as forward-facing, future-facing dread and worry. And depression is kind of rear-facing worry and dread. And so depression can look a lot of different ways. And it usually it presents in a lot of different ways, but usually it looks like not being enthusiastic or being into some of the things that you're traditionally like you normally do. In adults, you see disengagement from things they normally do, or maybe unable to get out of bed, a lot of sleeping, and just not feeling like the sadness will go away.
Mm-hmm. Chevy, what does
Yeah,
depression
so
look like?
to mimic that, so to make that connection between the collective trauma, you may find yourself having the depressive symptoms, like Toby mentioned. But again, if you're not seeing the connection between the collective trauma and your feelings, you might wonder why you're feeling sad all the time. Why is school hard to do? Why is it hard for me to get out of bed when maybe nothing individually maybe happened to me? But with the collective trauma, you can have symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety. And then once you realize that it's maybe a response to a collective trauma, you can get some support and help later on. So I know we'll speak about that later, about some things that we can do to help and support everybody. And to speak more about the symptoms of depression, they also go beyond just feeling sad. So I broke up with my partner, I feel sad. I lost, a loved one and I'm grieving. Those are different than what depression would be. And so to add to what Toby said earlier, you feel sad for no real reason. You can't quite pinpoint it, and times where you should be happy, you're not.
Right.
And that you really can't explain why. Some other symptoms are overeating or undereating for unknown reasons. I know that I've been overeating with the COVID, this collective trauma. Some of us might have also done that too. And you're not maybe sleeping well, you're irritable, you're angry, you're quick to snap at people more quickly than usual. So those are also some signs of depression where if they're maybe out of character for you, or you find that you can't fix it the way you might have been able to before, those might be signs of depression.
So as we wait for Toby to come back in, what questions should I ask or what should I expect someone to be, dealing with? Like, what questions should I ask them if they're dealing with the, like depression, or to kind of, measure that out?
Sure. So I think what's important to note is to ask those key questions of, do you feel sad, but you can't pinpoint why?
Mm-hmm.
And have you been feeling sad for longer than usual? And
What's
those
longer
symptoms
than
kind of aren't going
usual?
away. Mm-hmm.
What's longer than usual?
So typically more than 2 weeks would be an indicator that you're suffering from more clinical depression rather than symptoms of being depressed. So same thing with the irritability, the anger. If those symptoms are present for more than 2 weeks, then you might want to seek out support. And particularly for teenagers, that's hard to suss out. So I've been talking about irritability, anger, snapping at people, and you're like, well, that's my teenager all day.
It can be.
Like, what are you talking about? So it does get a bit trickier to diagnose depression for adolescents because of that. Their hormones are kind of out of whack. They're trying to figure out, literally how to name their feelings can be difficult to do anyway. One of the other signs of depression is low self-esteem. Well, we all kind of went through that in high school. So again, the key questions are they longer than usual? So for more than 2 weeks. And then are they interfering with how you're living your life?
That's so
it
good.
might,
Well,
so yes, I'm sad, but now I can't even get up out of bed and go to school. Those kind of things.
So Sharika, before I let you ask your question, Toby, literally you drank out of your water bottle, and I literally thought it was a ketchup bottle. Literally, I thought, what is he drinking ketchup bottle for? I don't know.
Oh, must be some therapy thing.
Okay, Sharika, go. You can go on.
Good observation, Melody. Good observation. So when we talk about our children suffering from depression and having dealt with trauma, if my child doesn't get treated for the traumatic situations that he or she's gone through and doesn't get treated for depression, what does that look like? If I don't get help for my child, what could that potentially look like in adulthood or even as a child?
There's no cookie cutter answer for that. I'll kind of stay in the realm of relationships because that's what I specialize in. But you'll see it in dysfunctional relationships, patterns of dysfunction in relationships, lashing out in relationships potentially. And depression does not automatically lead to suicide or suicide ideation necessarily. But I guess in general, I would look for behavior that's out of character. And usually, I think about it from especially from a traumatic standpoint. Most people in relationships as they progress into adulthood don't want to be hurt again by that trauma. So they protect themselves. And that shows up in a lot of different ways in relationships, but usually in some type of protectionist kind of behavior.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
So I'll add to that too, that untreated depression, you can't necessarily get over it. So that's another point that I want to make too. I think a lot of times people wonder why people with depression don't just kind of snap out of it, or just do something else to put a smile on your face and push through. It can be very difficult for teenagers and for adults. There is an increased risk of self-harming behavior. There is an increased risk of suicidality if it's untreated and not managed.
Okay.
So it is important to try to recognize those signs and support whoever it is in your circle that might be going through that. So be it your child or yourself or your family members, that it really is important, and there is help for that.
So I want both of you to answer this question, but Chevy, I'll start with you.
Okay.
So what is something helpful myself and others can do right now for someone who is suffering from depression, especially during a time where we're isolated because of the pandemic in our communities?
So The internet, for all its faults, can actually be a good resource for support. You might be able to find support groups that you can join. There's always pages that have, guided meditation, coping skills, self-care skills that you can look to. You can ask almost any adult in the schools for guidance, for help. So that means, hey, I don't know what to do. Talk to your teacher, talk to the counselor, talk to the social worker, talk to the mental health specialist, talk to the guidance counselor. If they don't know how to help you in the moment, they can probably guide you to additional support. And I think what might be most important is to give yourself permission to seek the help. Give yourself permission to seek the help, and give yourself permission to ask your friends and family if they're okay. One of the things I want to really emphasize when we talk about suicide and people and the risk of that is that asking someone if they've thought about hurting themselves does not increase the risk of them doing that. So I want to make that clear too. That's what the research says, that just asking, have you thought about hurting yourself? Either they have been thinking about it and they might say yes to you and you can help, or they haven't. But that does not implant the idea of suicide for them. So I really want to make sure that I, share that with everyone.
That's good. Toby?
Glad you said that. Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah, just to echo what Chevy said, especially about suicide. Talking about it is really helpful. I know a lot of us are scared to talk about it, but a lot of people that have suicidal thoughts, that's one of the things they want to do is talk about it, but most people are scared to talk about it. And going back to the original question, I think one of the things that's really changing the community, especially when it comes to mental health, is that I think the level of awareness has increased significantly and continues to increase. And especially in minority communities, there's always been a stigma about seeking help. There, you must be crazy. And I think the stigma is starting to go away. And one of the things that I've been really appreciative of are the number of celebrities who are speaking out and saying, I suffer with this mental illness, and it's not a shameful thing to go get help. And so, with that, I'd also add, kind of adding to what Chevy said, was that make sure that the help you go seek is qualified and been trained. And that's sometimes a downfall. We go to someone who's not trained to deal with depression, suicide. So it's very important to do your homework on their certifications.
So what if, Toby, what if you are trying to help and you're giving support? When do you relinquish? Like, I've put all of my help, my money, my mind, my time into trying to help someone, especially dealing with depression. And when do you relinquish for maybe even for your own peace of mind? So when do you relinquish?
As a parent? As a
parent or a friend or a support system?
I think if they're not getting better, and there's some things like going back to about being trained, the automatic reflex for a lot of people trying to intervene with someone who's has depression is to try to make happy. And so I think we're kind of pulling down the embarrassment of going to get help. And like Chevy was saying, there are a lot of good resources on the internet, and the availability of healthcare specialists is probably way more available than it used to be. So if you're really concerned about the behavior of your friend or your child, then and it's not getting better, definitely reach out and get some help, professional help.
So you both kind of touched on this, but I really want to ask this again. So there are so many barriers for some of us for seeking help, whether it's the stigma, whether it's insurance, whether it's, I don't know where to go. How do we get past those barriers as parents, as just individuals? How do we get past those barriers that keep us from finding that help? Chevy, you want to start?
So something interesting happened last week with a kid I was seeing. I had met with her before, last school year in the spring. And currently she's not necessarily experiencing like suicidality or suicidal thoughts, but mom could tell something was going on with her. So she like slipped my information under her door and gave it to her as a way to say, I don't know what it is, but maybe you should talk to somebody.
Great way to support.
And she reached out and, we've been talking ever since. So sometimes it can be as simple as that. Other times, I know a lot of the schools have websites up now for mental health support. I know Henry Clay has one that myself and Tori Mason, the social worker, created with different resources. There's, to piggyback on what Toby was saying, there's a lot more access to support now than there might have been before. So if you're more spiritually minded, you can find a therapist that works that way for you. If one of the simpler things you might be able to do is if you are insured, call the number on the back of the card and see who covers your sessions and how much the copay would be. So those are some avenues to navigate. But I am glad to see that more often people are saying loudly that, yes, I'm depressed and I see my therapist and this is what they said and they got me together. You know what I mean? So it's really exciting to see that more people are recognizing that if I need support, just like if my arm was broken, I would go to the doctor. Right. If these feelings are overwhelming for me, I go to therapy.
So highlighting more of those resources that are available in the community and, in the school district, I would like for the both of you to provide even more resources. Chevy, if you have more, you can mention more. If not, we'll move along to Toby.
Yeah, so on our website for Henry Clay, it's the mental health support and resources site. We have a list of resources there of community health resources, crisis resources, and crisis hotlines. There's KVC Behavioral Health Care, there's Mountain Comp, New Vista, Sunrise Children's Services. If you have a crisis or an emergency, you can call the Ridge, Samaritan, U of L Peace Hospital, and then there's several crisis lines that you can call as well. There's a suicide prevention hotline, 1-800-273-8500. There's also a crisis text line that I really like, and I think that'll be mentioned later too, that you can just text 741-741. You can text help, you can text just something, and someone will text you back. And that text line, you don't necessarily have to have thoughts of hurting yourself. It can be if you're just having a really big emotional day and you don't know who else to reach, you can text them and you can get some support there too.
Toby, you have anything to add? I know she routed out a whole bunch of.
Yeah, she covered it all, especially from a community level. But I would say one of the best referrals is word of mouth. And so with more and more people seeking out mental health services, word of mouth is really good. The other place often to look is like Psychology Today. They have find a therapist tool. You can put in your insurance and sort therapists in your community that way too.
That's good.
Awesome. That's awesome. So because this was such a heavy topic this evening, and we, of course, always appreciate our guests, but especially to get on here and talk about things that are just so deep and heavy. Our final question is really to kind of end on an encouraging word. So we are asking both of you all to just share something with our families. It can be a one word, word of encouragement. It can be a motto. It can be just one little tip to give our families to keep hope. And so, Toby, if you want to start, or you look like you're thinking. Debbie, are you ready?
I can think out loud. I would say since March, the level of anxiety, we're experiencing community and global level anxiety.
Yeah.
And the one thing that with this anxiety that we're all experiencing is that we'll ultimately get through it. And so that's one of the things that keeps me going day to day, that we'll get through it. Now, it'd be helpful if we had a definitive end date, which we don't really have, but knowing that we'll get through it has been a good thought for me lately.
Thank you. What about you, Chevy?
So I'll just say what I've heard a lot and what I like a lot is the radical grace, right? So radical grace, you might have mentioned it already, I don't know when, but I'll say it again if it
Yeah.
hasn't been said already. Radical grace for yourself, radical grace for others. We're all experiencing this pandemic together. And even, maybe there is a end date, and once it's over, other things are going to happen to us too. And so just to know that there is a community of people around you that can help you. So if you can't find it necessarily with your close-knit, like friends or family, give yourself grace to look outside of that for additional support for yourself, because you're worth that.
I love that.
That was good. Should I dare throw Sharika on the spot and tell her to give some encouraging words as well?
You know what? I think I'm ready for this. So
Okay.
I wrote this the other day for a biography I had to do, but I have truly been living by the quote. I don't know who said it, so don't ask me, but nothing changes if nothing changes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've been thinking, whatever it is in your life, whether it's you're suffering from depression or having suicidal thoughts, or, if you want something to change, nothing's going to change unless it changes. So that's just what I'm thinking about lately.
Well, look at you.
Your turn. You're not.
Keep hope alive. That's all I got right now. So, listen, you all, that was a lot of good information. And I want to thank you all for that information and the gifts that you all have really, gave us tonight. And so thank you for the resources for our family and our community. Thank you, everyone who's out there watching us tonight, especially any of you who could connect with the topics for tonight. And so we would like to stay connected with you and continue to build our stronger community of support for our families. Sharika is going to tell us how we can do that.
Absolutely. Yes, we would love for you all to send us pictures, videos, or words of encouragement that you all may have at home. So we can share them with each other. We will put that on our website. We actually, before this show, met with a teacher, an FCPS teacher who was a suicide survivor. She attempted and survived her suicide attempt and is willing to share with us her story. So we're going to put that on our website, some quotes from her. But also, if you're ready to do, send us your words of encouragement, this is how you can do it. Email us at faceit@fayette.kyschools.us. Or you can text the pictures or words of encouragement to us at 859-903-5531. And we are also going to show you some of the resources that Chevy and Toby both mentioned this evening. So our tech lady behind the scenes is going to put that up. I also want to, one more thing, remind you while this is up, throughout the month of November, we will be doing a giveaway every week. It's just the month of showing our gratitude, giving thanks. So keep an eye on our Facebook page on Fridays for your chance to win a $50 gift card to Kroger. All right, so that's a little secret there. You got to be watching to win. Look at our website on Friday for your chance to win. And get out your cell phone, take a picture of this slide right here so you can have those resources.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sharika, for that. Listen, you all, continue to pay attention to the 3-part collective trauma series that we are doing. The next Face It show will focus on racial trauma. And so that will also be live November 19th at 6:30. You all stay tuned for Infrentalo. It follows us next. Also, we love staying connected to you, and let's continue to face it together. We will see you all very soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.